Okay, this was kind of a stretch for this module in the sense of this is more about the principles that we're going to discuss rather than the practices per se, but the practices will tie into it because many of our discussions hover around the topic of shame. It seems to be at the root, or at least a strong influence in whatever it is that we're discussing. And as I said in the email, I was thinking about stigmatization, and I've talked about that in the modules, particularly where there's diagnosis, mental health diagnoses, and how, well, even in medical diagnoses, somebody when we get a diagnosis, a lot of people really take it to heart and identify with the diagnosis, whatever it is. Oh, I'm a depressive, or I'm bipolar. Whenever they use the I am phrase, then what that means is that they've adopted that as part of their personality and a part of who they are. And what that is makes it very difficult to recover. Because if somebody's identified as being bipolar, or whatever the diagnosis is, then they're going to be struggling against it or not even think it can be changed. And neither of which are true. I've been thinking a lot about the role of stigmatization in where shame is concerned. Because people who are high shame responding tend to stigmatize themselves and others. It's about judging someone's character, being for or against someone's character, even our own character. And we set up this very strong, contentious relationship with our own traits and the traits of other people. How often we say somebody who's a difficult person in our lives, they're such a whatever it is, they're so difficult, I can't believe it, or they're just and fill in the blank. And what that does, it stigmatizes them in our own mind. And we have those opinions about ourselves and other people, sometimes subtly, even though we don't really ascribe to that. And so stigmatizing, again, is about summing up someone's character, that they're a good or bad or a worthwhile, not worthwhile human being. Because I'm talking with a friend of mine about criminal justice reform, and she and I are on the same page about this, that people come out stigmatized into the world after prison, and it makes it much more difficult for people to actually change, which they can do. And then I was thinking, well, narcissism is kind of the same thing, except in a wanting to be admired by others rather than loathed by others. So feeling about I'm really great at this and great at that and great at this, and I got all these medals and I got to get these awards and I got this big job and I got all this stuff. There's a way of attempting to blot out those feelings of shame, overcome or smother those feelings of shame. And so I looked up the definitions, the definition of stigmatization and the process and the elements of stigmatization. And then I realized that somebody who is narcissistic does exactly the same thing, but in a positive way, meaning in not positive in the sense of ethical, but in positive of having more money or prestige or being more well-known or being more successful or whatever it may be, because they want to be seen as this sort of character. So both person is stigmatized in a negative way, then somebody wants to be seen in a very positive light. So they're going out light if they're going after prestige. It's the same It's the same thing. Because I realized in alcoholic homes, and it's changing the topic a little bit, but in alcoholic homes, there's usually you have, if it's a large enough family, you have one of each at least. You have an underachiever and an overachiever, usually. And so the overachiever wants to please the parents and be the mascot for the family. The first person, for instance, I've had clients, they were the first person in their family to go to college. And they go to college and they get a master's degree and they got a great job and so on and so forth, and they're the overachiever because they want to be seen as standing out in quality and character from their family and their community. Somebody on the other side feels that somehow they're flawed and that's just the way it is, then they act accordingly. And it's been a while, but I've talked about this research that was done on women, college-age women who had disordered eating. I mentioned this fairly recently, a few weeks ago, but it bears stating here that they had two groups. They had them come into the research lab, and the subjects thought that they were just going to fill out some sort of questionnaire, and that was the research study, but that was inconsequential. They wanted them to come in, and on the table where there was a researcher and the subject, they had a pile of cookies and cakes and chocolates and that sort of thing. And they wanted to see how people responded to that. So in group A, the subject would come in and the researcher would say, "Oh, this stuff is so terrible. I don't know why they put it there. It's just awful. I can't believe that people eat that stuff. It's just, and they go on and on about how bad it is." And then they had another group that would come in, it's going to randomize, and then the other group, group B, was the researcher would say, I don't know who put that there, but you can have some if you want. It doesn't really hurt to have a little bit once in a while. It's not good for you, but it's all right to have something once in a while. So group A had a shaming introduction, and the group B had a sort of neutral evaluation. And so they wanted to see how much of the sweets each group ate. And so when I first read it, I thought, group A. And actually I thought, well, why is that? Well, because when somebody is eating, if their disordered eating is as a compensation for shame, then the more they're shamed, the more they're going to eat. And so, and the people who were in group B, who were not, it was just a neutral. It was a kind of a neutral view to it. Then they ate less of it because their shame about their eating was less in group B. And so, if somebody's alcoholic, first thing you tell them what a terrible mess they're making of their lives, and they need to stop drinking. They just got to stop drinking. What do? The first thing they do is they go out and get drunk. There's an old AA joke. Well, how does an alcoholic fix a flat tire? They get out and they shoot out the other 3 tires. And that's just the dynamics of shame. So I thought and then I started to take a look at it. Okay, you have stigmatization and prestige on the other hand. And to me, it just illustrates perfectly what the research shows in terms of the absence of a clear sense of self. In other words, when somebody's in or even near their authentic self, those extremes don't happen. Because there's no need to be better or worse than anybody else. If we're okay and basically in or close to, or at least just friendly with our authentic self, that stuff is necessary, because we're just fine the way we are. Make a mistake, we clean it up. We try to help people as best we can. We got difficult people in our lives, or we lose our temper once in a while, but that doesn't make us bad people. We just made a mistake, and if we have offended somebody, we go clean it up. And so that is those are the dynamics of somebody in pretty good contact with their authentic self. So it goes back to these, when we talk about criminal populations, and we talk about narcissistic tendencies, both of those, from my view, occur because of an unstable sense of self. And that unstable sense of self, there's only two self-identities, a true one and a false one. Those are the only two options. So the more we have a sense of our authentic self, the easier life gets, and things begin to calm down, and we begin to get a better sense of direction, and we tend to be more content with ourselves and content with life in general. And I often talk with clients, and they say, well, how do I start? And to me, the best way to start is with a mindfulness meditation, because that begins to put us in touch with our authentic self and to relax all of our considerable efforts to fix our life or make our lives work better in some way, or our negative self-views or whatever it is we're involved in. So all that stuff begins to relax. Now over time, it doesn't, as we all know, it takes time. But it's why, meditation is a lifelong endeavor. Because what I've found is the more somebody meditates, the more stuff you discover. I mean, the obvious stuff is right in our face most of the time, day in and day out. But when we really start investigating, and over a long period of time, we begin to notice patterns and emotions and memories, and as we continue to resolve those things, that's where the really deep sense of connection begins to arise, because those things will limit our ability to be in contact with our authentic self. So I thought we'd do an extended mindfulness meditation, and paying particular attention, if we can, to the pause, the space between thoughts. And that is, as we've discussed in the past, is our natural mind. Let's put it that way, our natural mind. And the more we are able to be aware of and accepting of that natural mind, the more our personality settles, and the more in tune we get with that natural mind. And that brings about all kinds of really positive changes in life. And then that gives us the ability to then encounter compassion, because we're relaxed and caring of ourselves and others. Okay, so let's get started. And finding a comfortable position, as usual. And we'll begin. And allowing ourselves to just settle down. Maybe taking a couple deep, intentional breaths. As we step sort of as we might use the metaphor of stepping off, pushing off from the dock into the still waters of the lake. And allowing the thoughts of the day and up to now fade away if we can. And any concern about what comes next also. To let those fade as well. And inviting our emotions and our mind into the stillness of the body. And settling into this stillness, this silence as best we can. And if the mind is still jabbering, that's okay. We can slowly remove our attention from that process. Whatever arises, we're not obligated to think about it. And allowing ourselves to sink a little further, floating into this stillness and this space of present moment awareness. And finding this space inviting, perhaps. And if we're able to do so, we may see that thoughts about the future or the past can't really even enter, or if they do, we just let them float on through. And as we continue to settle, just bringing our awareness to this space between thoughts as best we can. And allowing ourselves just to come to a place of ease. where it's easier and easier to just be. And the more we let go of the world, the more we can just be aware of our own being and our natural mind. And as we continue to settle in this space, letting go of whatever arises. For at the moment, we really don't need anything. And perhaps getting the sense that in this space, even though there's a lot of things in all of our lives floating around, the space has the suggestion of resolution or contentment. And knowing that we can just sit in this space whenever we wish. And bring it as much into our daily life as we can. And as we do this, in this moment, life may seem to get simpler. And as best we can, just sitting in this space, just being and being aware. as best we can. And now getting a sense that you may be receiving a visitor soon, one from within. Who from this space is a spiritual friend. That seems to reside at the very center of our being, coming to pay us a visit. And imagining where we are right now or another setting, more fitting perhaps for receiving this friend soon. Place that's safe and comfortable and nourishing. And as we settle in to this space, this safe space, this spiritual friend is arriving. It may be any form, as a person or a ball of light or whatever it may be, arriving from the center of our being into our safe space. And as we receive our guest and settle in, we realize our friend has a message for us. One that will help us in our daily and lifetime travels. And transmitting this information in whatever way seems most fitting. Perhaps expressing an openness to receive and to know what they have to contribute. And as this being the epitome of wisdom and compassion, transmits this to you, this information, being able to absorb it fully as best you can. And feeling that information sinking in and being absorbed with open-hearted gratitude. And in the fullness of this exchange, in the presence of your spiritual friend, sensing that your friend has an object or something to give to you as a token of this experience. And as we receive it, feeling that this whole experience is encapsulated and resonant with whatever one has received. And now sensing the fullness of this experience's visit, nearing completion. Offering whatever parting phrases you would like, and receiving whatever parting phrases your spiritual friend offers. Knowing that we are somehow enriched thereby this experience. And settling back into the pause, this space. Perhaps as a bit of a different being. Perhaps a little wiser and more compassionate. Perhaps with the understanding that this spiritual friend is actually a part of our own being at the very core of our awareness. Along with a desire to maintain open communications with this part of ourself going forward. And as we absorb this experience as fully as we can, getting a sense of being perhaps a little richer and wiser and more compassionate than we were a few moments ago. And allowing the whole experience to settle into the body, allowing the body to absorb it, fully savoring it, letting it sink in to the bones and the breath. So that in a moment when the bell rings again, you can bring this with you as you go about your day and come back to it at any time.